Have you ever been told you didn't belong? Right in a place you paid to be? I sat in seat 2A, a first-class ticket in hand, dressed in a quiet suit that didn't scream money or power. But that didn't stop the flight attendant from sneering, "You're in the wrong seat, sir." She didn't even check my boarding pass before summoning security. Cameras weren't rolling yet, but something else was. A test, a plan, a trap. Not for me, but for them. They thought they were humiliating a passenger. They were exposing a system. And I was recording everything. They say power walks quietly. That morning, I boarded Flight 726 from JFK to LAX without a word, wearing my favorite charcoal gray hoodie and slacks. No designer logos, no entourage, no Rolex on my wrist. Just me, my briefcase, and a first-class seat, 2A. The boarding pass sat neatly tucked in the outer pocket, along with my Platinum Elite card. It wasn't the first time I'd flown in that cabin. It wouldn't be the last, or so I thought. I was barely seated, settling in, when she appeared. Tall, rigid posture, clipboard in hand. Catherine Doyle, lead flight attendant, mid-40s, the kind of woman who wore her seniority like a badge of righteousness. Her eyes scanned me like TSA might inspect an unattended bag. "This seat is not for people like you," she said, voice low but sharp. I blinked once. "Excuse me?" She didn't flinch. "Sir, you're in the wrong seat. First class is for full fare passengers." I kept my voice measured. "It is. I am." I reached for my boarding pass and handed it over without a word. She didn't even look. Just made a show of holding it at arm's length like it might infect her, then handed it back with a forced smile. "Anyone can print one of these at home," she said. "You'll need to move to the back, sir." The air in the cabin grew noticeably tense. A few heads turned. The businessman across the aisle, white, mid-30s, tailored suit, Bluetooth still in his ear, gave me a once-over and chuckled. "You heard her, man. This isn't Southwest." I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I reached again into my briefcase. Slowly, deliberately. I retrieved my Platinum Elite card, sleek and unmistakable, and held it beside the boarding pass. 8 years, status verified, I said calmly. Catherine gave it a cursory glance and scoffed. "Fake cards are easy to buy these days. I've seen dozens." Her tone wasn't just dismissive. It was dehumanizing, as if I were a child caught playing dress-up in someone else's clothes. My patience thinned, but I breathed through it. This wasn't new. It was just louder than usual. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, "but I am assigned this seat. It's paid for, confirmed." She leaned in slightly, her perfume sharp and cold. "I don't care what you say, sir. I said move." A hush rippled through the cabin. This wasn't a request anymore. It was a confrontation. I noticed the man 2 rows behind me angle his phone ever so slightly. He wasn't live streaming, not yet, but the red light blinked once. Then again, he was recording. He caught my eye for a brief second and smiled. Not a cruel smile, something calmer, calculated. I stored the detail. "This is ridiculous." The man across the aisle, Gregory Finch, I'd learn later, snorted. "He's holding up the flight. Just move him." Catherine's lips curled into a professional sneer. "Exactly. If you don't comply, sir, we'll have to call security." Still, I said nothing. I didn't shout, didn't raise my voice. I simply adjusted the cuffs of my hoodie and leaned back, folding my boarding pass and Elite card neatly, returning them to my wallet. "Call whoever you need," I said. "I'm not moving from my assigned seat." Catherine's jaw tightened, the kind of tension that comes not from doubt, but from the fear of losing control. She turned on her heel and stalked toward the galley. I glanced around. The atmosphere was thick with judgment. A few passengers looked away, uncomfortable. Others looked amused. And a few, just a few, watched with curiosity. The man with the phone? Still recording, still smiling. I focused on my breath. This wasn't about a seat anymore. It never was. 2 minutes passed. Catherine returned, this time with a younger attendant in tow. Tyrone, name badge just visible. His posture screamed discomfort. "Sir," he began gently, "Miss Doyle has concerns about your boarding credentials." I nodded toward him. "Understandable. You're welcome to verify them." I offered the documents again, but Catherine cut him off. He needs to move, now. Tyrone hesitated, then nodded once to me, almost apologetically, and backed away. He wasn't going to push it. Smart. Catherine leaned in again, louder this time. "Last chance, sir. Either move or I call airport security." The businessman across from me, the same one who chuckled earlier, smirked. "Some people just need to learn their place," he muttered. That did it. Not rage, not sadness, just clarity. I opened my briefcase again and took out my phone. I tapped a single message, no more than a few words. Sent. Then I looked up at Catherine. "You may call whoever you need," I said. "But understand this, you're not the only one making calls today." She looked thrown for the first time. Another ping from across the aisle. The man filming stood up and walked toward the rear of the cabin. Still recording. I heard Catherine call for ground crew over her radio. Urgency replacing arrogance. I sat back in seat 2A, calm as ever, and waited. This wasn't the beginning of a scene. It was the beginning of a story. The plane door remained open. The engines weren't humming yet, but tension filled the cabin like static. I sat perfectly still in seat 2A, arms relaxed, face unreadable. I wasn't trying to make a statement, at least not visibly. Silence, when used with precision, is louder than outrage. Across the aisle, Gregory Finch leaned forward in his seat, arms draped casually over the armrests like he owned the sky. "First class is earned, not begged," he said, just loud enough for everyone in the front cabin to hear. His voice oozed superiority, each word dipped in condescension. I didn't even glance his way. Instead, I tilted my head slightly, watching Catherine Doyle pace like a general preparing for war. She pressed her radio again. "Get me Roger Lane. I need a supervisor at gate 14 immediately." That name sparked something in the air. Roger Lane, the floor supervisor with a reputation for backing his crew without question. No matter the situation. I'd heard his name before, long before this flight. He had a file. Everyone had a file. Catherine turned to me triumphant. "Mr. Lane will be here in 2 minutes. I hope you're ready to explain why you're refusing to comply with crew instructions." I didn't respond. That was the point. 2 rows behind me, the man with the phone, still recording, crossed his legs and looked out the window as if he weren't documenting the start of an internal collapse. His face was unreadable, but I noticed a small smirk form as he noticed Catherine's panic grow more visible. That's when I reached for my phone again. No exaggerated movement, no dramatic gesture. Just a smooth slide of the zipper on my briefcase and the quiet tap of my finger on the screen. The message had already been written. All I needed to do was hit send. The camera behind me, hidden in plain sight, embedded in a pair of Ray-Bans, captured it clearly. Phase 1 complete. A subtle ping confirmed delivery. The irony wasn't lost on me. Everyone in the cabin thought I was being humiliated, powerless. Just another angry black man pretending to be someone he wasn't. But they weren't watching a man being broken. They were witnessing a system being tested, and it was already failing. Catherine, unaware of the silent detonation, stood near the bulkhead, pretending to speak calmly into her headset. But I could see it in her shoulders. Tension, twitch, control slipping. She had made this personal, and that was her first mistake. Roger Lane arrived within moments, brisk and clipped, wearing a navy blazer and a face that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. Late 50s, thinning gray hair, permanent scowl. "What's going on here?" he asked Catherine, barely glancing at me. "This passenger is refusing to move from a seat he didn't pay for." He presented suspicious documents, platinum card and boarding pass, but they look fake. Roger finally looked at me. Really looked at me. I met his gaze with one of my own. Calm, measured. "Sir, we don't want to escalate this. If you'll just move, we can sort this out after takeoff," he said. "Mr. Lane," I replied, "I'm not moving from the seat I paid for. You're welcome to verify everything with corporate. My credentials are legitimate." Catherine rolled her eyes. "He's stalling and delaying departure." That last word was strategic. Delays meant fines. Late takeoffs meant cost. She knew it. She wanted to turn this into a logistics problem, not a discrimination one. Gregory, still lounging across from me, chuckled again. "Come on, man. You don't belong here, and we all know it." Another ripple. Passengers shifted uncomfortably. Some murmured. One woman gasped. A man behind me whispered, "Did he just say that?" Kayla Monroe, 3 rows back, tapped something on her tablet. Unlike the others, she wasn't live streaming, but her fingers moved too quickly, too precisely for someone just texting. Analytics, engagement metrics, maybe headlines. I'd seen that rhythm before, in war rooms, in crisis teams. Catherine turned to Roger. "Should I call security?" Roger nodded. "Yes, let's remove him. We'll figure out the rest later." And there it was, the moment of no return. I tilted my head and looked directly at Catherine. "Miss Doyle," I said, "before you make that call, I'd recommend you check the passenger manifest again, carefully." She looked annoyed. "Why?" "Because this is going to be the most expensive customer service decision of your career," Roger snorted. "Are you threatening us?" "No," I said. "I'm documenting you." Catherine didn't check. Instead, she radioed for security. A wave of motion swept the cabin. The mood shifted from awkward tension to open discomfort. Passengers weren't sure which side to pick, but they knew the line had been crossed. And still, I sat, calm, steady. Gregory leaned toward Roger and whispered something. Roger nodded, then barked into his radio. "Expedite security. We've got a refusal." Catherine stood next to me like a statue. "You had your chance to comply." I looked at my phone one last time. The response came quickly. "Phase 2, in progress." The man recording in row 4 smiled wider. They thought they were removing a problem from the cabin. What they didn't realize was that they were giving a live demonstration, one that would be played on every news channel within the hour. And I was still just getting started. The moment Catherine Doyle pressed her radio for the second time, I knew the outcome had already been decided. Not by me, not even by her, but by a culture that had been trained to see men like me as temporary guests in spaces we helped build. She turned to Roger Lane, and together, with all the assurance of 2 bureaucrats walking through procedure, they sealed their decision. "He's refusing to comply," Catherine said coldly. "He needs to be removed." Roger gave a single firm nod. "Let's get him off the aircraft." It wasn't just about power now. It was about face. Neither of them could back down. They had gone too far, said too much, attracted too many eyes. In the theater of authority, retreat looks like weakness. Catherine turned to the front row, scanning for new witnesses. That's when her gaze landed on a young woman holding up her phone, clearly recording. She stood in the aisle, bold and unapologetic. "Ma'am," Catherine snapped. "Recording is not permitted during crew operations. I'll have to ask you to stop." The woman, 20s, South Asian, wearing a Rutgers University hoodie, held her ground for a beat before slowly lowering the phone. The disappointment on her face said more than words ever could. She wasn't intimidated. She was exhausted, tired of seeing this story play out. Around her, murmurs of dissent began to bubble up. Passengers shifting in their seats, glancing at each other with uncertain eyes. They weren't activists, just people. But people remember what injustice feels like, even when they try to look away. Meanwhile, in seat 3C, Kayla Monroe sat still. If Catherine had looked closer, she might have noticed that Kayla's sunglasses weren't just fashion. The discreet lens embedded in the left arm blinked twice. Barely visible, unless you were trained to see it. And I was. Kayla hadn't spoken a word since she boarded, but she had been watching everything. Calculated, analytical, detached. A strategist. Her hands rested on a closed leather folio, nails immaculately painted, no phone in sight. But the Ray-Bans were working overtime. Catherine didn't see her. That was her second mistake. Roger approached me now, posture rigid. "Sir, last chance. Step off the aircraft voluntarily or we'll have to escalate." I leaned forward slowly, opened my briefcase again, and withdrew a dark leather wallet, thicker than the one holding my boarding pass. I flipped it open, revealing a laminated ID card with the airline's own logo embossed at the top. Roger took it before I could speak, yanking it from my hand with a force that made several passengers gasp. He turned to Catherine. "Is this supposed to be some kind of joke?" he said, holding the card like it burned him. "Fake employee ID," Catherine declared. "I've never seen this format." Roger nodded, already convinced. I watched their performance with detached curiosity. The card was real. More than that, it wasn't just an employee ID. It was an executive clearance badge issued by the Airline Strategic Oversight Division. One step below the boardroom. One step above everyone in this cabin. "I suggest you verify the ID before making assumptions," I said evenly. But they didn't. That was the plan, of course. They wouldn't. Roger waved over another crew member. "Store this. We'll report it to security." He handed the ID off without a second glance. My credentials, my official access, built over months of quiet work, dismissed like trash. Kayla's sunglasses caught the entire exchange. No reaction from her face, but I saw her foot tap once, then stop. She had logged the moment. Timeline marked. Incident indexed. Across the aisle, Gregory Finch chuckled to himself and leaned toward Catherine. "This guy's a professional con artist. Probably scammed his way onto the plane." "I wouldn't be surprised," she whispered back, confident that I couldn't hear. They were both wrong, not just about my seat, or my credentials, or my position. They were wrong about what this was. This wasn't a passenger conflict. This was a controlled event. I shifted slightly in my seat, placing both hands on my lap. Still no aggression, still no raised voice. The optics were perfect. Not because I needed them to be, but because they already were. Behind me, murmurs swelled again. "I think I saw his name on the passenger manifest," someone whispered. "That ID looked real to me," said another. A woman toward the rear of first class stood halfway up. "If he's got the documents, why won't they just check them?" But Catherine had made her choice, and Roger had doubled down. Every step they took now was not about justice or policy. It was about pride, and pride, when misaligned with power, leads people straight into collapse. I watched as Catherine approached the cockpit phone. She lifted the receiver, spoke in hushed tones, and hung up quickly. "Security is inbound," she declared to the cabin, loud enough for everyone to hear. Gasps. A few people looked panicked. One man pulled his mask up higher, as if that might shield him from association. The quiet respect I'd earned in silence was beginning to ferment into outrage. Not mine, but theirs. The cabin was changing sides, slowly, reluctantly, but surely. Then came the lowest moment. A man in business attire from row 5 shouted, "Just remove him already, I have a meeting in LA." The dominoes were falling. The perception of inconvenience was overtaking the perception of injustice. And that was the system's oldest trick. Delay a flight long enough, and you'll make even good people resent the wrong victim. I looked down at my empty hands. The ID was gone. The boarding pass dismissed. The platinum card ignored. To everyone who hadn't been watching closely, I looked like a stubborn man making a scene. The optics had reversed, and that was precisely what I needed. A total collapse of appearances. The first emotional low. The illusion of defeat. Because only when the system thinks it has won does it lower its guard. The soft chime of the flight deck's intercom preceded the knock. Sharp, official. 2 short raps against the cabin door. Catherine Doyle glanced up, eyes shining with vindication, then nodded toward Roger Lane. "Open the door. That's our escort." The cabin door creaked slightly, and in stepped Officer Naomi Carter. Her presence shifted the atmosphere, not because of a weapon or a uniform, though both were present, but because she was the first face that looked remotely like mine. A black woman in law enforcement, mid-40s, composed, collected. Her shoulders held years of experience, and her eyes betrayed the weight of knowing exactly what was happening the moment she entered. Her gaze swept the cabin quickly. She took one look at Catherine's rigid posture, another at Roger Lane's folded arms, and finally, her eyes met mine. Recognition flickered, not of identity, but of context. She knew this scene. She'd walked into it before, in different cities, different forms, and the ending was always the same. "Mr. Brooks," she said gently, her tone careful, "I'd like to speak with you briefly." I nodded, stood slowly, and adjusted my hoodie as if preparing for turbulence. A few passengers clapped softly. It wasn't applause, it was relief. The show was ending. The disruption was being removed. Their inconvenience resolved. As I stepped into the aisle, Catherine exhaled in triumph. "Finally," she muttered. "He should have just cooperated." Roger didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His silence was loud enough. Naomi gestured toward the forward galley, and I walked alongside her. The cabin murmured behind me. One woman whispered, "Why didn't he just go when they first asked?" Another said, "He was probably lying. That car didn't look real." Each word chipped at the edges of truth. I glanced sideways at Naomi. "You know this isn't right." She nodded, lips pressed tight. "I do, but right and regulation don't always walk together." We stopped just inside the galley, out of direct passenger view, but not out of earshot. "Your credentials?" she asked quietly. I had them. They were taken. "You can confirm everything through corporate." She paused, her fingers twitching toward the radio clipped to her vest, then pulling away. "They've already filed a report stating you presented falsified documents and refused multiple lawful orders. Once that's submitted, my discretion gets thin." "So this is going to be official?" I asked. "I don't want it to be," she said, "but I need you to cooperate, for now. Let me walk you off calmly. If there's an error, we'll fix it from the ground." Fix it from the ground. That's what they always said. I nodded once. "I'll walk." We re-entered the cabin together. Naomi stayed slightly ahead, her presence a buffer between me and the narrative that had already been written in their minds. As I stepped into the aisle, several passengers avoided my gaze. Others stared directly, satisfied. A young man near row 6 smiled mockingly. "Play stupid games. Win stupid prizes," his friend finished. They laughed, and I didn't respond. Each step toward the door was calculated, not in vengeance, but in documentation. Gregory Finch leaned back in the seat 2A now, legs stretched, jacket off, already celebrating. "Finally," he said to no one in particular. "Champagne, please?" Catherine smiled at him like he'd saved the day. I looked back just once, not at her, not at Roger, not even at Gregory, but at Kayla Monroe. Still seated, still silent, still watching. Our eyes met for less than a second. She didn't blink. She didn't nod. But I saw it. The file was still uploading. The cabin door closed behind me. Naomi walked me down the jet bridge in silence. Once we reached the terminal, she exhaled audibly and turned to face me. "I'm not filing a charge, but they may press one through internal security." I nodded. "Understood." "They'll say you delayed the flight, obstructed crew instructions. There's a file already open under your name." "There's a file open under yours too," I said quietly. She blinked. "Excuse me?" "Not from me, from them. Internal Affairs tracks officer compliance with bias reports. Your name's on 3 of them. You've handled each one perfectly. That's why they sent you." Her eyes widened for just a breath, then narrowed. "Who are you?" I didn't answer. Instead, I stepped toward the gate window where the plane was still parked, jet bridge retracting. I pulled out my phone. Messages blinked across the screen. "Phase 3. Confirmed. Asset Monroe. Upload complete. Public drop ETA. T-minus 30 minutes. The storm hadn't started. It was being timed. Behind me, Officer Naomi Carter stepped away slowly, the gears turning. She didn't need more answers. She already had enough to start questioning the entire event. I sat down in the waiting lounge, surrounded by idle travelers, none of whom knew what had just happened beyond that glass window. On the tarmac, the aircraft began taxiing backward. Gregory Finch, comfortable in a stolen seat, sipping stolen champagne, believed the victory was his. Catherine Doyle believed her authority had been reaffirmed. Roger Lane believed his decisions were final, and the passengers believed the disruption had been handled. But the truth? The truth was preparing for takeoff, and it had 38,000 feet of airspace left to climb. 30 minutes. That's all it took. From the moment the plane's wheels lifted off the tarmac, slicing into the early afternoon sky, to the second the first major news outlet picked up the story, it was exactly 30 minutes. The cabin crew had no idea what had been set in motion. Catherine Doyle probably believed she'd won. Roger Lane likely assumed the paperwork was done and buried. Gregory Finch, no doubt, was sipping complimentary champagne, maybe even drafting a brag-worthy post about entitled passengers, ruining the travel experience. But while they cruised above the clouds, the world below was catching fire. It started on Twitter. No warning, no hashtags. Just a quiet drop from a nondescript account. At Dignity Watcher, no profile photo, no followers, no bio, just one post. This is what racial profiling at 35,000 feet looks like. Full clip, unedited, recorded with FAA-compliant silent cam optics. You decide. Attached was a 9-minute HD video. No voiceover, no edits. Just raw footage. It began with Catherine standing over me, the condescension in her voice slicing through the calm. Every dismissive gesture, every interruption. The look on Gregory's face when he mocked me. The boarding pass. The platinum card. The executive ID. My refusal to be baited. Their collective refusal to acknowledge truth. Even Naomi Carter's discomfort. Her hesitation. All of it. Angle perfect. Audio crystal clear. Timestamped. Verified. Within 10 minutes, the post had 4,000 retweets. Then 10,000. Then 50,000. At minute 11, CNN picked it up. The headline was stark. Black passenger removed from first class. Denied despite valid credentials. CNBC followed. Then BBC. Then Al Jazeera. The footage went global in less time than it had taken to escort me off the plane. Newsrooms scrambled to verify the video's source. But at Dignity Watcher had gone dark. No new posts, no responses, no visible digital trail, because it had never been meant to be traced. Kayla Monroe had done her job with a surgical precision. Inside a WeWork suite 5 blocks from the airport, she sat at a polished steel desk, sunglasses placed neatly beside her laptop. On the screen, real-time analytics, engagement spikes, sentiment trends, cross-platform shares. She wore the calm of someone who just launched a missile and was now tracking the shock waves. Beside her, another monitor played the live news feeds, each one looping the same footage, the same confrontation, the same injustice. In the airport lounge, I watched it all unfold on my own screen. The leak hadn't been mine. That would have made the narrative personal. I couldn't be seen as the man trying to clear his name. I had to remain the mystery, the wronged, the still unnamed. It was better that way. Let them wonder who I was. Let them focus on the behavior, not the title. By the time the flight landed, the video had been viewed 8.7 million times. And rising. Catherine's voice. Anyone can fake these cards. Roger's dismissal. Let's just remove him. Gregory's laugh. First class is earned, not begged. These weren't just mistakes anymore. They were public record. A case study. By now, journalists were calling the airline's PR hotline non-stop. Statements were being drafted, redrafted, withheld. Legal departments were calling emergency meetings. Investors were calling board members. The ripple was becoming a tsunami. Then came the hashtags. #seat2. #quiet power #dignity watcher. They weren't just trending, they were merging. People weren't just watching anymore. They were organizing. Screenshots of Gregory's face circulated alongside his LinkedIn profile. Catherine's full name and tenure history were pulled from internal sources and posted on Reddit. Roger Lane's record with the airline was exposed, including 3 previous complaints buried in HR reports. And all of it was happening before I even boarded a cab. Naomi Carter messaged me once. "Are you seeing this?" I didn't respond. I was already planning the next move. In a downtown high-rise, the CEO of the airline, Elaine Fisher, stood before a wall of screens. One showed stock tickers, red. Another, Twitter sentiment dashboards, crashing. A third displayed incoming call logs, board members, regulators, civil rights organizations. "This wasn't a passenger incident," her legal counsel said. "This is a systemic failure, caught on camera." Elaine rubbed her temples. "Who is he?" "No idea," came the reply. "But he's not average. His movements were too precise. His silence, calculated." By 5:12 p.m., the airline's official Twitter account posted a statement. "We are aware of a video circulating regarding an incident aboard Flight 726. We take these matters seriously and are conducting a full internal investigation." Too late. The narrative was no longer theirs to control, because cameras never lie. And the truth, it had already gone viral. The private lounge at Terminal 4 was quiet. Too quiet for a day like this. No champagne flutes clinking. No business travelers bragging about boardroom wins. Just silence. Thick, suspended. I sat alone, hands folded on my lap, legs crossed casually, watching the CNN broadcast muted on the wall-mounted flat screen. The ticker ran beneath the anchors' faces like a digital drumbeat. Breaking. Viral video shows airline staff removing black passenger from first-class seat. Airline stock tumbles 6% in early trading. Hash seat 2A hits 10 million shares. Across the room, the door opened with a discreet hiss. Elaine Fisher stepped in like someone who knew her title didn't shield her anymore. Regional Director, Western Division. Normally sharp. Today, slightly unbuttoned. Her blazer was still pressed, but the crease between her brows hadn't left since 3 p.m. "Mr. Brooks," she said, her voice low. "Miss Fisher." She didn't sit immediately. She looked at me for a beat longer than most executives would. Assessing, calculating. "You asked to see me?" "No," I said, not unkindly. "You asked to see me." She nodded, conceding the point, then finally lowered herself into the chair across from me. "The clip was extensive." "Unedited," I clarified. She nodded again. "We're conducting a full internal, don't waste my time, Elaine." That stopped her. Not the words, but the use of her first name. No one called her that unless they were above her, or outside her reach. "Would you prefer I address you by your full title, Mr. Brooks?" I smiled, just slightly. "Which one?" She blinked, not out of confusion, out of confirmation. She already knew. The clip hadn't just gone viral. It had triggered searches, queries, whispers from boardrooms to shareholders. And finally, her call to corporate had confirmed what she was too afraid to guess. She reached into her leather folio and pulled out a printed shareholder registry. Top 20 entries highlighted. "Nathaniel Brooks," she read aloud. "Brooks Equity Holdings, 24.2% voting interest in our parent company." I waited. "That makes you our largest private stakeholder," she continued. "Larger than any institutional group, including Vanguard. And with proxy agreements," I added, "my voting power currently covers 38.7% of all board decisions." That hit her like turbulence. "So when I say I'm disappointed," I said, "it's not just as a customer, it's as an owner." She set the folder down but didn't break eye contact. "Why didn't you reveal this on the flight?" "Because that would have changed nothing," I said, "except protect the people who needed to be tested." Her brows furrowed. "Tested?" I leaned forward slightly, voice low. "You don't change a system by filing complaints. You change it by proving the rot lives in the bones." "You set this up?" she asked, incredulous. "No," I replied. "Your team did. I just turned on the lights." Her expression hardened. "You manipulated my staff." "I gave them an opportunity to do the right thing. They declined." Silence stretched between us. Then I opened my briefcase and pulled out a folder marked Civil Rights Compliance Audit Phase 3. Inside were the authorization signatures from the Department of Transportation, the FAA's oversight branch, and a federal task force on systemic bias in corporate aviation. Elaine's face drained as she scanned the documents. Every signature was real, every seal embossed. "This was sanctioned?" Phase 1 was anonymous complaint verification. Phase 2 was passive behavioral monitoring through third-party passengers. Phase 3, I said, tapping the folder, was direct engagement under real-world conditions. "You were the test subject?" "I was the test." Elaine sat back. "Catherine Doyle, Roger Lane, they had no idea." "They weren't supposed to," I said. "Bias doesn't need a spotlight to perform. It just needs a stage." Her hands trembled slightly as she closed the folder. "This will destroy careers." "No," I corrected. "They destroyed themselves. I just brought receipts." She stared at me, then asked the only question that mattered. "What happens now?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a second folder. Black, leather-bound, embossed with a simple logo, the Brooks Protocol. "I meet with your board in the morning," I said, "to decide whether we reform this company from the inside or dismantle it piece by piece from the outside." Her eyes widened. "You wouldn't—" "I've already received offers," I interrupted. 2 rival carriers, 3 private equity firms. They'll buy my stake tomorrow if I give the word." She swallowed. "And the board? They'll follow the money. They always do." Elaine took a breath, stood, smoothed her blazer. "I want to help." Then start by suspending Catherine Doyle and Roger Lane. Immediately. Publicly. She nodded. Consider it done. As she turned to leave, I added, "One more thing." She paused. "That leak, the one from at Dignity Watcher?" "Yes." "That was never meant to be a scandal," I said. "It was a mirror. What happens next determines whether this company smashes it or looks closer." She held my gaze one final time, then walked out. The door closed behind her. On the lounge TV, the news anchor was still speaking. "The man removed from seat 2A remains unidentified officially, but sources say he holds significant influence within the airline's corporate structure. They didn't know my name yet, but by tomorrow, they'd know my policy." By sunrise, the ripple had become a wave. News vans lined up outside the airline's regional headquarters like paparazzi outside a celebrity trial. Journalists shouted questions through glass doors, trying to catch glimpses of anyone who might offer a quote, a confession, or, if they were lucky, a scapegoat. But the truth had no interest in hiding today. It had already been printed. At 7:42 a.m., a leak emerged, not from social media, but from inside the company itself. An internal HR document, redacted and time-stamped, but still damning. 27 complaints filed against senior flight attendant Catherine Doyle over a span of 9 years, all citing discriminatory behavior, racial bias, classism, selective enforcement of policy. Every one of them marked with the same resolution: no action taken. The leak came from an anonymous employee using the handle at Ground Truth OPUE, and it hit like a bomb. It wasn't just the number of complaints. It was the pattern. Same types of passengers, same types of accusations. Same management response: silence. Within the hour, another document followed, this time naming Roger Lane. As regional supervisor, he'd received and signed off on at least 16 of those 27 incidents, each time closing the file with the phrase, "insufficient grounds for escalation." Screenshots flew across Twitter and Reddit. The evidence was layered, undeniable, and damning. Catherine's actions weren't isolated. They were part of a system that protected her at every turn. And now, the world knew it. Outside the building, reporters surrounded anyone wearing a lanyard. "Did you know about the complaints? Is this how you treat all your premium passengers? Why is she still employed?" Inside, the walls were cracking. Elaine Fisher called an emergency all-hands briefing with the legal, PR, and ethics teams. The mood was surgical. No small talk, no donuts, just damage control. "We can't spin this," one executive whispered. "We need a fall guy," another muttered. But there was no singular fall anymore. The entire foundation was compromised. At 10:03 a.m., I walked into the press briefing room, not flanked by lawyers, not flanked by security, just me, holding a single folder and a prepared statement. The room fell silent. Cameras clicked. Phones lifted. Elaine stood off to the side, lips tight, eyes locked on me. She knew this wasn't for her. Not yet. I stepped up to the podium and adjusted the mic. "My name is Nathaniel Brooks," I began, "and I'm the largest private stakeholder in this airline." Flashes, audible gasps. Some of the reporters already knew. The rest were scrambling to search the name, confirm the holdings. "I am not here to defend myself," I continued, "because I don't need to." I opened the folder and held up the leaked documents. Catherine's complaint record, Roger's signatures. "I am here to ask a simple question. How many more complaints were buried before one went viral?" Silence. I turned the page. How many passengers were humiliated, dismissed, or silenced, simply because they lacked a camera or a corporate title? I looked up, letting that hang, then said the words I had planned all night. "Where bias lives, trust dies." The sentence rippled through the room. Dozens of reporters typed it into headlines in real time. I saw one of them mouth it as she wrote. "I do not believe that every employee in this company is corrupt, but I do believe that the system currently in place enables and protects those who are. And if the company does not dismantle that system, then I will." Elaine shifted in her seat. Legal counsel leaned forward. PR managers typed furiously into their phones. "I'm not here to destroy this airline," I said. but I am prepared to do so if reform is not immediate, public, and complete. And then I stepped away from the podium. No quanda, no elaboration. Let the silence speak louder. Back in the hallway, I ignored the media swarm. My phone buzzed non-stop. Civil rights groups, senators, investors, some in panic, some in awe. CNBC ran a split screen. Me at the podium on one side, the airline stock ticker on the other. AA, minus 9.3% and falling. Analysts called it a confidence hemorrhage. Still, I hadn't filed any lawsuits. No injunctions, no SEC reports, no shareholder rebellion. Not yet, because fear was a better motivator than force, and anticipation was a currency of its own. Let them sweat. Let the public hold its breath. Let the headlines compound before the gavel even dropped. By mid-afternoon, hashtags were trending globally. Hash where bias lives, hash unmask the system, hash Brooks speaks across cable news. Pundits debated whether I was a whistleblower, a plant, a corporate revolutionary. They compared me to activists, executives, even intelligence agents. But none of them had the right word yet. Because I wasn't a title, I was a consequence, and I was just getting started. The press didn't stop. The headlines didn't slow. But by the evening of that same day, something shifted. Something quieter, more deliberate. The noise outside was overwhelming. But the storm behind closed doors had just begun. At precisely 6 p.m., I stepped into a secure conference room on the 38th floor of a federal building in downtown LA. I wasn't alone. Waiting at the table were 3 officials, one from the Federal Aviation Administration, another from the Department of Justice, and a third, my contact from the Civil Rights Division. All of them had received the clip hours earlier, but this meeting had been scheduled weeks in advance. They didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. I handed over a folder, thick with documentation, timestamps, transcripts, anonymized passenger complaints, all gathered through months of shadow observation on dozens of flights, all targeted at one company, the airline. This, I said, completes Phase 4. The DOJ rep nodded. It's more than enough. The FAA agent leaned forward. Based on this evidence, we're formally upgrading the classification to a systemic discriminatory infrastructure violation. Translation? The airline wasn't just guilty of isolated employee misconduct. It had violated federal civil rights compliance at a systems level. That meant deeper audits, possible loss of licenses, and yes, lawsuits. I opened another folder. Our legal team is preparing a class action framework. We've identified more than 300 passengers with documented complaints that were ignored, buried, or retaliated against. The DOJ official scanned the names. If half of these people testify, they won't need to, I said. The footage is enough. The complaint patterns are enough. The training logs, or lack thereof, are enough. The FAA agent spoke again. And your stake in the company? Unchanged, I said, still holding. For now. They all knew what that meant. I wasn't divesting. Not yet. I wanted leverage, not escape. Because pulling the plug too soon would collapse the system, reforming it from within. That took patience and power. But the final card hadn't been played yet. As the DOJ official closed her folder, she looked up. Nathaniel, how did you stay off radar so long? I pulled out my final envelope. Inside, a sealed federal badge. Not for show. Nathaniel Brooks, Senior Oversight Advisor, Civil Rights Compliance Task Force. Their silence was immediate. I placed it gently on the table. My role was classified until activation. You've just been briefed under federal authorization. I wasn't just a shareholder, not just a wronged passenger, not just a name trending on Twitter. I was a federal plant, inserted into high-level corporate positions across industries to monitor long-term systemic violations. Catherine Doyle never had a chance. Roger Lane was collateral. Elaine Fisher, still a question mark. By the time I exited the federal building that evening, the sky was bleeding into dusk, and my phone was already buzzing with updates. Catherine Doyle, terminated, effective immediately. Roger Lane, placed on unpaid leave pending investigation. Elaine Fisher, scheduled for board hearing. Employee bulletin leaked. All frontline staff to undergo emergency bias training within 72 hours. I didn't respond to the calls or texts. Instead, I walked to a nearby rooftop, overlooking the glowing chaos below. News vans, protesters, executives pacing inside towers of glass. The wind caught my coat as I looked over the city. This wasn't just about one airline. This was the opening salvo of something much bigger. And it was only a matter of time before the other companies realized. If your house is built on bias, don't be surprised when someone shows up with a federal warrant. Meanwhile, inside the airline headquarters, panic had settled into paralysis. Elaine Fisher stood in front of her crisis response team, blinking at the email stamped DOJ notification investigation active. The team was stunned. "No warning?" one executive asked. "None," she replied. But she knew better. The warning had come long ago, buried in the first complaint, the first ignored report, the first customer they chose to silence rather than protect. They had built a culture that punished visibility and rewarded complicity. Now the lights were on. Across social media, #LegalStorm trended alongside #Brooks Uncovered and #Systemic Failure. A legal analyst on MSNBC held up a printout of the complaint timeline and said, "This isn't an isolated incident. It's a blueprint of institutional rot." Another said, "This is the first time we've seen corporate whistleblowing from the top down instead of bottom up." And then came the public reaction. Disbelief, outrage, vindication, especially among those who had once sat in 2A and been told they didn't belong. Their stories resurfaced. Voices that had been dismissed for years suddenly given a second life. I filed a complaint in 2016. I got a voucher and a thank you email. That was it. My father was escorted off a flight for asking why he was skipped during beverage service. They said I was aggressive because I asked for a blanket. Now, their stories weren't anecdotal. They were admissible. And they were all part of the class action file that now sat on the desk of the U.S. Attorney General's office. The storm was no longer gathering. It was here, and I was its architect. The boardroom wasn't built for revolution. Its walls were lined with oak. Its table was 15 feet long, and the chairs were soft enough to cradle egos for hours. Every inch of it screamed stability, tradition, untouchable power. But today, those walls felt thinner. At 8 a.m., the emergency board meeting of American Concordia Airlines began behind double glass doors, guarded by 2 security staff and 3 PR reps who were clearly in over their heads. 12 members sat at the table. 11 thought they were in control. The 12th, he was holding the detonator. I entered without fanfare, without security, without even a briefcase. Just me, a single notepad, and a calm that made everyone else nervous. Elaine Fisher avoided my gaze. Her role in the fallout wasn't forgotten, but she wasn't the target today. The chairman cleared his throat. Harold Wynn, 76, pale, still wore cufflinks from the company's IPO. "We're here," he began, "to discuss the extraordinary disruption that has impacted shareholder confidence, brand equity, and operational integrity within the past 72 hours. No one corrected him. "Mr. Brooks," he continued, "while your stake in this company is significant, your conduct has raised concerns. Translation, you embarrassed us. You've bypassed internal grievance processes, involved federal agencies without board notification, and jeopardized our market standing." "Jeopardized?" I said, raising an eyebrow. "Or exposed?" The room went still. Harold continued, undeterred. "Given these actions, the board has moved to call a vote for your removal as a Class A director, effective immediately." A few heads nodded. Others looked down. Some seemed relieved, expecting I'd accept my ousting quietly and disappear. I let the silence hang for 3 seconds, then spoke. "Denied." Harold blinked. "Excuse me?" I reached into my notepad and slid forward 2 signed agreements. "Last night, I acquired 12% of outstanding shares from 2 major ESG funds, Emergent Impact Capital and True North Investments. They've transferred all proxy voting rights to me until further notice." Harold reached for the papers with shaky hands. I continued. "That brings my total voting power to 50.7%. No one spoke. Elaine stared at the documents like they might dissolve under scrutiny. I smiled, gently. "I'm not leaving the board. I am the board." A few directors shifted in their seats. One audibly gasped. "I suggest we shift this meeting's agenda," I said. "From my removal to our company's survival." Harold looked ready to argue, but the legal counsel, tight-lipped, calculating, whispered in his ear. He sat back, defeated. "This isn't a coup," I said, standing slowly. "This is a rescue." I walked toward the projection screen at the end of the room and connected my tablet. On screen appeared the same video the world had already seen. Catherine Doyle, arms crossed, barking orders, dismissing credentials, waving away evidence. Then the headline slides. 27 complaints ignored. 16 reports signed off by management. Class action pending. Federal oversight activated. The final slide was a live graph. Stock price recovery simulations under 2 scenarios. Option A, denial. Option B, accountability. The difference? $3.4 billion in projected valuation over 6 quarters. Money talked. The room listened. "I'm not interested in revenge," I said. "I'm interested in transformation." A pause. "Effective immediately. I'm installing the Brooks Protocol, a 5-part system-wide reform initiative that includes mandatory bias training, third-party audit integration, real-time AI behavior tracking, anonymous passenger reporting systems, and a $50 million scholarship fund to diversify aviation careers." Some murmured, others nodded reluctantly. Then I clicked again. Catherine Doyle's employee file appeared on screen. "Item 1, I said. "Termination to be confirmed publicly, with transparency and acknowledgement of failure, not scapegoating." Elaine finally spoke. "Publicly? We can't issue her name. The union will have no leg to stand on," I cut in. "Her actions violated federal compliance and civil rights regulations under active audit. The union would be defending a liability." Silence. I turned back to the screen and highlighted one final note in Catherine's file. "Pending legal action, civil rights complaint 003 DOJ oversight file, #9022A. "And yet," I said, turning to the room, "we will not slander her. We will not launch a media smear campaign." That surprised them. "She will be terminated," I clarified, "but with dignity, because the point of reform isn't humiliation. It's restoration." A beat of unexpected stillness settled. I looked to Elaine. "You'll issue the internal memo." "I've already drafted it." She nodded. "Yes, sir." "Roger, Lane," I added. Elaine looked up. "Pending internal investigation. Recommended. Demotion, suspension without pay, and mandatory retraining under independent oversight." "Approved," I said. The board began to shift again, this time toward acceptance. They realized they weren't witnessing a hostile takeover. They were witnessing a bloodless revolution, a blueprint for corporate redemption. By the time I left the room, the Brooks Protocol was officially adopted. By majority vote? No. By ownership decree. Because when reform won't come from the top, you change the top. And when power refuses to listen, you become power. The press release dropped at 9 a.m. sharp. No leaks, no anonymous sources, no behind-the-scenes whispers. Just one clear headline across every financial news site, corporate wire, and aviation feed. American Concordia Airlines adopts the Brooks Protocol, a landmark reform initiative for corporate equity and passenger rights. The subheading was even clearer. Board-led initiative introduces AI monitoring, diversity training, and a $50 million aviation scholarship fund. No apologies, no denials, just action. Inside the airline's sleek headquarters, a live-streamed internal broadcast had begun, piped to over 80,000 employees worldwide. Flight attendants in airport lounges, ground crew huddled around break room screens, even pilots watching from cockpits during taxi. And at the center of the stream stood me. No suit, no tie, just a dark navy pullover and the same calm I'd carried into seat 2A. "Good morning," I began. "My name is Nathaniel Brooks. Some of you know me as a passenger. Others now know me as a board director. Today, I'm here as both. And more importantly, as someone who believes this company can change." I paused. Let the moment breathe. We've all seen the headlines. We've all seen the video. And while the world debates it, analyzes it, trends it, I'm going to do something simpler. I lifted the black folder, the same one I'd presented to the board. "This is the Brooks Protocol," I clicked a remote. The screen behind me lit up with 5 pillars. Pillar 1, AI-powered in-flight bias monitoring. Every flight, every cabin, every interaction, now monitored in real time. A graphic displayed smart cabin cameras, behavior analytics, sentiment mapping. Not to invade privacy, but to protect dignity. The AI system would scan interactions between staff and passengers, flagging patterns of differential treatment. Who gets ignored, interrupted, approached more harshly. Bias doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Our AI is trained to hear it. If a flight attendant skipped over passengers of color during drink service 5 times in a row, it was flagged. If staff repeatedly invalidated IDs or documentation based on race-coded behavior, it was logged. Supervisors received instant notifications. Patterns were reviewed weekly. Trends triggered retraining. This isn't about policing, it's about awareness, I explained. Because you can't fix what you refuse to see. Pillar 2, $50, Million Scholarship Fund for underrepresented aviation careers. The screen shifted to images of aspiring pilots, engineers, airline ops managers from historically excluded communities. This isn't charity, I said. This is pipeline equity. The Brooks Fund would provide full-ride scholarships, mentorship, flight hours, and job placement for students pursuing aviation careers at HBCUs, tribal colleges, and community colleges across the country. Within 1 year, over 400 students would be on track to enter the industry, and they wouldn't be entering from the back door. They'd walk through the front with credentials, training, and opportunities the system never offered before. This industry looks like the past, I said. It's time it looks like the future. Pillar 3, 60 hours of mandatory anti-bias training for customer-facing staff. Gone were the days of the 2-hour annual compliance videos. 60 hours, I said. That's what it takes to begin unlearning what the world taught you. Training would be scenario-based, data-informed, and led by independent civil rights experts. Real-world incidents, including those drawn from the audit, would become case studies. Attendants wouldn't just learn what not to do, they'd learn why behavior mattered and how passengers internalized it. Refusal to complete training meant suspension. Failure to demonstrate learning meant role reassignment. Bias wasn't just a bad attitude. It was now a performance metric. Pillar 4, anonymous passenger feedback platform. Power shifts when silence breaks. A new app interface allowed passengers to submit anonymous reports directly to the compliance office, bypassing the front line entirely. The system protected whistleblowers and ensured feedback wasn't filtered, dismissed, or redirected to customer service black holes. Passengers won't be told to take it up after landing anymore. They'll be heard in real time. Reports could include ratings, comments, media uploads, and AI-integrated speech-to-text summaries. Weekly transparency dashboards would be posted online. This wasn't just internal housekeeping. It was public accountability. Pillar 5, micro-behavior mapping and staff equity indexing, perhaps the most controversial but most transformative pillar. Using aggregated behavioral data, every customer-facing employee would receive an internal equity index rating, a score reflecting patterns of fairness, inclusion, and conduct over time. No one could see their own rating. Managers couldn't game the system. Reviews came from an algorithm cross-verified by human ethics panels. Promotions required passing thresholds. Repeat offenders triggered intervention or termination. Bias isn't always loud, I said, but it always leaves a trail. As I finished, the screen faded to black. For a moment, the live stream was silent. Then, across social platforms, the response exploded. Comments poured in. Finally, an airline doing something real. Brooks Protocol needs to be mandatory industry-wide. Hire this man to run the FAA. I cried watching this. Just booked my next 3 flights with American Concordia, and the stock, it rebounded like a slingshot. After the initial 11% drop following the viral video, the announcement sent the stock soaring 14% in after-hours trading. Analysts called it a trust bounce, a phenomenon where transparency and decisive reform earn back more than apology ever could. BlackRock issued a rare statement of support. Vanguard increased its holdings. The NAACP issued a letter of endorsement. Even Delta and United were rumored to be drafting their own internal Brooks-inspired reforms. In the airline's corporate command center, Elaine Fisher stood watching the sentiment analytics climb. Her assistant whispered, "We've never seen a turnaround like this." Elaine didn't respond immediately. Instead, she watched the comments scroll, the media praise mount, and the passengers begin to believe again. "He just saved us," she murmured. No, not saved, rebuilt. Because redemption isn't granted, it's earned. And sometimes it starts at 35,000 feet with a man who didn't move when they told him to. Elaine Fisher waited behind the curtain, one hand gripping the edge of the podium like a lifeline. The press was already seated, dozens of journalists, some local, most national, a few international. Behind them, cameras blinked red, streaming live to millions. A single microphone stood center stage, flanked by the airline's logo on one side and an American flag on the other. She was supposed to walk out and say it all. "We're sorry. We take full responsibility. We pledge to do better." The script had been rehearsed, the backdrop approved. The lighting softened to make her appear more sincere. A teleprompter glowed with bullet points crafted by public relations professionals who charged by the hour. But Elaine couldn't move, not because she doubted the sincerity, but because the man seated in the front row, arms crossed, expression unreadable, had told her 15 minutes earlier, "You don't fix bias with PR." Nathaniel Brooks hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't threatened. He had simply told the truth in a way that made the apology suddenly feel inadequate. "You can say you're sorry," he'd said in the green room, "but what will that change? Catherine's already gone. Roger's already suspended. The Brooks protocol is already live. An apology now isn't for justice. It's for optics." Elaine had opened her mouth to reply, but Nathaniel raised a hand. "I'm not here to be a prop in your redemption arc," he said. "I'm here to rebuild the structure that let this happen." Now, sitting in that front row seat, he watched as Elaine stepped back from the curtain, nodded once to her staff, and made a different choice. She didn't go on stage. Instead, the live stream cut to a press bulletin. Public apology postponed, new governance announcement pending. Twitter buzzed. Cable news anchors scrambled to fill airtime. But Nathaniel smiled, not because he wanted chaos, but because someone had finally chosen silence over spectacle. 2 hours later, the real meeting began. The board was tense. The media was gone. The conversation turned inward. Elaine, eyes steady but tired, stood and faced the directors. "We've apologized enough," she said. "Now we act." She clicked a remote. A slide appeared with a single name, Dr. Laverne Wallace. Some flinched, others murmured. Dr. Wallace had once been a senior HR executive for the airline. 6 years ago, she had been fired for insubordination after refusing to suppress multiple internal complaints related to racial profiling, including one filed by a Somali-American gate agent and another by an elderly Caribbean flight attendant. At the time, the airline had accused her of creating a toxic environment. Internally, she had filed a wrongful termination claim. It never reached court, settled quietly, forgotten publicly. But Nathaniel had not forgotten. "I want her on the board," he said now, standing beside Elaine, as Executive Director of Equity and Ethics. "A permanent seat," immediate protest erupted. "Absolutely not. She sued us. That's a PR nightmare waiting to happen. She's too vocal." Nathaniel let it build, then cut through the noise. "Let me be clear," he said. "I'm not asking." A hush. "I'm offering you a choice, redemption or replacement." One board member, a younger woman from the finance sector, leaned in. "What exactly does she bring to the table?" "Context," Nathaniel replied. "History, integrity, and a name the public trusts." Another member asked cautiously, "Do you think shareholders will support this?" Nathaniel didn't answer. He didn't have to, because within the next hour, the decision wasn't made inside that room. It was made outside. A Reddit post went viral titled, "This is the woman they fired for speaking truth. Now the guy who fixed the airline wants her back." A Twitter thread compiled all of Dr. Wallace's prior statements, interviews, and whistleblower quotes. Her TEDx talk on corporate complicity resurfaced, climbing to 3 million views. Even TikTok caught on. Videos with the hashtag #BringBackWallace hit 20 million views in under 12 hours. More surprising than the public support was where it came from. Retired employees, former passengers, even current staff who'd never dared speak before. She was the only HR rep who listened to me. I owe her my job. She fought when no one else would. Hire her or to lose us. Then came the shareholders, small ones, retail investors, flight attendants who'd bought a few shares during the employee incentive years, teachers who held the stock through pension funds. They organized, they signed open letters, they sent emails to board inboxes by the thousands. And when the stock bumped another 3%, not from policy, but from people, the board understood what Nathaniel already knew. The crowd doesn't just watch anymore. The crowd decides. At the reconvened vote, Elaine stood once again, all in favor of appointing Dr. Wallace to the board. Hands raised, hesitant at first, then more, then all. Unanimous. It was done. That night, Nathaniel stood alone on the rooftop balcony of the Concordia Tower, watching the city pulse beneath him. The skyline glowed like a circuit board, each light a data point in a system that had once believed itself untouchable. Behind him, the door slid open. Elaine joined him. No words for a while. Then finally, "You could have crushed us." "I still might," he replied. She chuckled, tired. "But you didn't." He looked at her. "Because punishment satisfies," he said, "but accountability transforms." "And what about forgiveness?" she asked. "That," he said, turning back to the skyline, "has to be earned." They stood in silence again until Elaine spoke once more. "Why, Dr. Wallace?" "Because she warned you 6 years ago, and you didn't listen." Elaine nodded slowly. "She deserves more than just a seat." "She'll take it," Nathaniel said. "And she'll turn it into a platform." As the city buzzed below, a new press release hit the wires. Dr. Laverne Wallace appointed to board of directors at American Concordia Airlines. Public applauds corrective leadership. And just like that, the story turned again. Not from scandal to silence, but from rage to renewal. Not from exposure to extinction, but from collapse to course correction. The crowd didn't cheer revenge. They celebrated a second chance. And Nathaniel Brooks, he didn't ask for thanks. He just made sure the door that had once been slammed in his face would never close again. 1 year later, American Concordia Airlines was no longer the company people remembered. It was better. At the annual shareholder summit in Seattle, the CEO, newly appointed, deeply vetted, and chosen from a historically underrepresented background, announced the company's latest performance metrics with quiet pride. "Customer satisfaction has reached a historic 94.3%, she said, "the highest in our company's 82-year history." The crowd applauded, not because of the number, but because they knew how far it had come. The Brooks Protocol, once controversial, was now considered industry standard. The AI bias monitoring system had identified thousands of microaggressions that previously went unreported. Every flagged incident had become a training moment, not a scandal. Staff turnover dropped, passenger trust climbed, and the most impressive metric, complaint-based removals dropped by 78%. The data didn't just tell a story, it rewrote the narrative. Meanwhile, in a studio in New York City, Kayla Monroe stood on stage clutching an Emmy Award. The category, Best Investigative Documentary. Her film, The Seat That Changed Everything, was a detailed, emotionally resonant, and visually stunning account of what had started in Seat 2A. It combined hidden footage, interviews with passengers, FAA officials, civil rights experts, and behind-the-scenes clips never released to the public. But its emotional anchor wasn't Nathaniel Brooks. It was the people who had been silenced for years, the quietly removed, the disrespected elders, the overlooked frequent flyers who once believed injustice was simply the cost of travel. Kayla had told their story, and the world had listened. Her final line in the film echoed over the Emmy stage as she accepted the award. What happens in one seat affects every cabin, and sometimes the flight that changes the world starts with one man refusing to stand. Back at Concordia HQ, the company had commissioned a new training facility named after Dr. Laverne Wallace, where staff across every level, from baggage handlers to board directors, were required to complete immersive simulations based on real-world events. It wasn't performative. It was policy. And seated quietly in one of those very training sessions, without cameras, without announcement, was Catherine Doyle. After her termination, the public backlash had been swift, but it was what came after that surprised everyone. Catherine disappeared from headlines. 6 months later, she published an anonymous essay in The Atlantic, What I Couldn't See at 30,000 Feet. It was a raw, honest, uncomfortable self-examination of the subtle prejudices she had inherited, normalized, and never questioned. It went viral, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. And it caught Nathaniel's attention. He reached out, quietly. No press, no reward. And after months of conversations, most of them hard, some healing, he extended a conditional offer. You can't rewrite the past, he told her, but you can prevent its repetition. Catherine agreed. Now, after retraining, therapy, and a public commitment to accountability, she'd been reinstated, not as a flight attendant, but as a bias awareness trainer, teaching from the very failures she once embodied. Her first lecture began with these words, "I was wrong, and if that makes you uncomfortable, good, because it means you're listening." The transformation wasn't cinematic. It was slow, unfolding, earned, and no one understood that better than Nathaniel Brooks. At the Global Aviation Equity Summit in London, he stood before a crowd of executives, regulators, activists, and investors. He didn't bring slides. He didn't show graphs. He just spoke. "Respect," he said, pausing to let the word breathe, "is not a gift. It's a right no one should have to negotiate." He told the story of Seat 2A, of being removed, of watching people look away, and of choosing not to destroy, but to rebuild. He told them about Catherine, about Kayla, about Dr. Wallace, about the thousands of passengers who now flew with their heads held high, knowing that their dignity wasn't conditional. He ended with this: justice is not the end. Transformation is. The room rose in applause, not for spectacle, but for principle. Outside the conference center, a child boarded a Concordia flight with her father. She clutched a toy airplane. The attendant greeted her warmly, kneeling to her eye level, handing her a small pair of wings. Her father, a black man in a tailored suit, smiled as they made their way to Seat 2A. He didn't know the story. He didn't need to, because the seat was ready for him. It always should have been.